Welcome back, Warriors, to another episode of Anxiety Warriors Podcast. Woo-hoo!
Yes.
Yes, we're so excited for this episode. We have an amazing guest on today. Her name is Rebecca Robbins. She was just such an interesting and fun guest to chat with.
Yeah.
And before Abby gets into a little bit of a recap for us, let me tell you all a little bit about Rebecca. Rebecca Robbins is a speech-language pathologist specializing in the treatment of autism spectrum disorders. She owns her own private practice, Mind Sharper SLP LLC, which provides direct services for individuals with autism, as well as online parent training services and courses. Personally, Rebecca is a self-proclaimed personal development junkie who has used her passion for learning and growth to turn her life around after she found herself at rock bottom moment in 2018. She has lived an alcohol-free life for the past 3+ years and is passionate about sharing what she's learned during that time with others. Rebecca lives in Pennsylvania with her amazing fiance, where she focuses on growing their relationship and her business. You can also find her gracing local stages in various theatrical pursuits. Rebecca has an overall zest for living her best life and believes there are no regrets, only learning experiences. All right, Abby, tell us a little bit about what this conversation was all about.
So it was really great to just hear how, Becca shares how she starts off by, growing up in a really strict household and how basically she was grounded for everything. She shares how like she didn't close the shower door and that caused her to be grounded. And so she was so, accustomed to getting in trouble in life that it was like, what's the point of even trying? And she started to rebel in early adulthood around 18, 19 years old. And her story really beautifully shares one, how patterns from childhood manifest when we're adults, when we don't even realize it. And also how all behavior is communicating unmet needs. And so as a child, her behaviors were like rebellion, which was communicating how she didn't like to be controlled. But as an adult, she turned to alcohol. And alcohol was really covering up her deep feelings of anxiety and feelings of wanting to please others and just never really feeling good enough. And it took until like her hitting rock bottom for her to see how alcohol has really impacted how she was living all of her life, and that through step-by-step changes, small changes every day, she's now living a life that she feels inner peace and outer peace and more authentically aligned with who she is.
Yeah, it was such a great conversation, and we can't wait for all of you to hear it. Here she is. Welcome back, Warriors. We are so excited for today's guest, Rebecca Robbins. Welcome to the podcast.
Yay! Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, Abby and I were really thrilled that you reached out and with interest to be a guest. And when we had a chance to talk a little bit about your anxiety story, let's just start there because that's what we do. We talk about people's anxiety stories here. It's the name of our podcast, and everyone's got one, or at least everyone that comes on has got one.
Yes.
So let's just dive right into yours, Rebecca. Can you share with us a little bit about your anxiety story?
Yes. So my anxiety story, I think as many do, starts, in childhood. But mine, not so much that I experienced my anxiety in childhood, but it was the root of what eventually led to my anxiety as a young adult and in my adult life. What's intertwined with it is my story of how I used alcohol and smoked cigarettes and eventually led to me becoming sober. So let's just start at the very beginning. So I was raised in a pretty strict household. And so I think there was a time when I was a teenager where it felt strange that I wasn't grounded and I would get grounded for things like, forgetting to close the shower curtain and things like that. So, but I was ultimately a really good kid, a straight A student. I really wasn't like bad or anything, but my parents were just very strict. And so that ended up manifesting in myself a rebellious streak. What you will. And so I would do things that I knew I wasn't quote unquote supposed to do because I was rebelling against being controlled. And and so when I would do things that I wasn't supposed to do, that led to me having anxiety about getting caught or getting in trouble. And that pattern kind of continued into my romantic relationships and the men that I would choose to be in romantic relationships with. And I would choose to be with people most of the time that were kind of controlling. And so I would often find myself in these relationships where I was walking around on eggshells, and my anxiety was heightened to the sense that I was, again, feeling like I was going to get in trouble because I was in relationship with people that I got in trouble with. And so I would also have a rebellious streak. And then, so because I was so tightly controlled when I was in high school, then when I turned 18, my parents actually started raising my nephew about 2 weeks after I graduated high school. And when they started raising him, they basically stopped raising me. So I went from being really controlled and having a lot of rules and restrictions on me to zero rules and restrictions. And so when I was like 19, I was kind of a wild child, and I just kind of, it's like that Catholic schoolgirl syndrome where you kind of just go wild, and I took it as, for a long time, because I still kept myself on track with my schooling and my academics and everything like that. And I almost wore it like a badge of honor that I could work really hard, maintain the straight A's in my schooling, and do really well academically and all of that. But then at night could party my butt off, party with the best of them. But then that double life over time actually ended up lending itself to me feeling anxiety as well, because I was kind of not living in integrity of who I really was. So this, as I got older, it definitely got worse. And I especially noticed it. I was in a relationship in my late 20s, early 30s, where he was very possessive and controlling. And after we broke up, I went through that phase again when, like I did when my parents kind of stopped raising me, where I kind of went wild and I was going out and hanging out in bars, and my drinking amped up again and everything else. And I remember after we had broken up, I had gone out with one of my friends to the mall on like a Wednesday night. And it was like 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden I had all of this anxiety about needing to get home, and I have to get home. Like, it's getting late. And I was like, what is wrong? Like, why am I feeling this way? I don't have a curfew. I don't have to be home at any particular time. There's nothing I have to do. And then it dawned on me that the reason I was feeling that way was because for the last 4 or 5 years, if I had stayed out 1 minute too long, and I never was aware of when that minute too long would occur, but if I stayed out 1 minute too long, I was getting in trouble. So this was a very difficult, became very deeply ingrained in me, I think, from childhood, because I would get in trouble a lot in childhood, and my reaction to that was rebellious, which would get me in even more trouble. So I found myself just kind of walking around with this level of anxiety about getting in trouble or getting found out or something when I was doing things that I didn't need to worry about getting in trouble for.
Yeah.
Like, you were a grown up. You were no longer a kid. And yet, I mean, at the beginning of the story, like, the thing that is just, I feel like, just so powerful is two-part. One is how deeply those patterns are ingrained in childhood. Like, however we are raised, right? The stories we make about how we were raised, right? And so those fears of like getting in trouble don't just end in childhood. They don't just end like the moment that you become like an adult or more independent. Like, they still follow you, and they create these other like fulfilling of the patterns, like continuing that, let me get in these other controlling relationships. because that's kind of what I'm comfortable with. I'm comfortable with being controlled. That's what I know. Whether I like it or not is different, right? But it's like that powerful thing of like what we know. And then my question is, you talked about like how you felt like you weren't living integrity with who you really were, right? But like what was the story you told yourself when you were, because I've known you a long time. You've always been a great worker, right? You're an amazing, you work with children, you're amazing with them, you're amazing with adults, and we can talk about that at some point. But when you would not have your professional life, right, and you would have your party life, like what was the story you told yourself? Like, I deserve this because I worked hard, or like what was that story?
Well, I think that it was for a long time, like I said, like a badge of honor that I could do both. Like, oh, look at what I can do. I can go out and I can party hard, but I still wake up. I think there's a saying, it's not female centric, but like party with the boys, you better wake up with the men, or something like that. Like I could do that, but what occurred to me in just listening to you, Abby, was my parents were always just kind of very on like straight edge, on the right track sort of people, always do the right thing, very moral. And I always kind of put them up on a pedestal that they were so good and I wasn't that good. And I don't know if maybe part of that was just like self-sabotage that was happening, or I don't really know, but I think it was just an outlet that I needed to just release all of this pent up part of me that was being controlled. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, almost it sounds like the way you said that, it was like, well, I will never be as good as my parents, so why bother trying?
That's what I heard too, a little bit, just like not this feeling that you were used to, always beneath the surface of, well, I'm not good enough, even though I work really hard and I'm very successful and high achieving, and I'm able to live a really successful life, and also, hang out with everybody and party and be the life of the party, and, get a little crazy when I'm in the after work hours. Right. And so like, that's kind of what I was hearing too, like what Abby kind of just reflected, which is just like, my parents are X, and so I can never be X, right? If they're above me, they're on that pedestal you just said, Rebecca, right? It's like, even if I want to be that, in my head, maybe I'm not that.
And even though I wore that badge of honor, there was a lot of shame attached to that behavior too, because it wasn't quote unquote doing the right thing.
It's like almost like this impossible standard, right? Which I think a lot of us, even if we didn't get it in our homes growing up, I think that what Abby said really struck a chord with me too, about like what we were taught as in our foundational years stays with us through our adulthood. It's not often discussed either, like how often, traumas or whatever small minutia, big or small problems or issues that come up in our lives, starting from the time when we're really little up until adulthood, you don't always think about, well, oh, that's probably stemming from something that happened to me as a kid, or that behavior, or that freak out that I just had, or that anxiety is probably stemming from something from a long time ago. So you just mentioned shame. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about, or hear from you a little bit about some of the ways that anxiety would come up in your mind and body, whether it's from your past or things you remember, or things that you experience currently when you're feeling anxious.
Yeah. So I would definitely, I know you guys have talked about this on your podcast, and with being anxiously attached. So I would definitely describe myself as an anxiously attached person. So I would find myself in relationship with people, both romantic relationships and in friendships, with people that I think, like, here we go. I'm like, this is like therapy, you guys. I'm realizing I put my parents on a pedestal, and then I was like, I would put these people on a pedestal, like these men that I dated and some of my friends, excuse me, some of my friends. And I would definitely second guess myself. I would value their thoughts and opinions more so than mine. I would always put the blame, default to like I was the one to blame, or I was the one that was wrong. And definitely that the worst part of my anxiety was just that fear of getting in trouble, and also of people leaving me, because when my parents stopped raising me at 18, that left me feeling very abandoned. And so I had this fear when I was in relationships that if I really let them know my real self, that they would leave me or abandon me. And also from just previous experience with them, that they would get mad or yell at me for things that had happened. So it was a lot of like bending over backwards and people pleasing. And even though I recognized that when I broke up with that boyfriend in my late 20s and early 30s, I recognized it as an unhealthy relationship. And I said to myself, I am never going to date someone like that again. But because I didn't recognize the pattern that I had to turn to rebellion and drinking and smoking and all of that to cope with my heartache and my heartbreak, I didn't really do the work that I needed to do. And I ended up finding myself in an even worse relationship down the road, like 5-6 years later. So it really just, I guess, showed up most like in these unconscious patterns and behaviors that I didn't end up recognizing until I was in this like terrible rock bottom situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the first thing, like, I just want to highlight, because we all know I'm obsessed with anxious attachment, like attachment theory. Like someone asked me the other day, like they asked me a question and I was like, it's just a tool in the toolbox, right? I don't like think anxious attachment or attachment styles are the end all answer. And I also want to say in that is that like everything you were saying, putting people on a pedestal, second guessing yourself, are all markers of an anxious attachment. Right. And so, feeling shame, feeling afraid to show your true self, fear of abandonment are all, I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to it, but I feel like a lot of people can also relate to those behaviors when they read about like anxious attachment. They're like, oh, that's me. So like, I just want to like share that, like I can relate, I can relate to those anxious attachment markers as well. And then, I just think that what you just said was like, after the end of that last relationship, you were like, I'm never doing this again, because you realized it was unhealthy, and yet you didn't do the work. And I'm sure we're going to dive into that, but I just want to highlight like making changes requires a lot of effort and work. And just because we have the aha moment, the awareness that something wasn't working, without actually putting in the work, like things won't change. And so I just love that you said that piece, because right, like, and you did do the work, right? But like, but sometimes we learn a lesson, but we don't apply it moving forward, and we don't do the work to learn from it. So I just thought that was a really powerful part that you put in there.
I love that you mentioned that too, Abby, because I feel like it can be common for people, for us anxiety warriors, to whether you're anxious attachment or not, to be people pleasers, to be afraid of someone's reaction to a behavior of yours or something you said or did. And so just for anyone's like, oh, maybe that is me, right? You hear something that Abby just said very succinctly, and it's like, yeah, that could be me. And maybe that means I'm anxious attachment. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Right. I mean, and so learning about it, this learning about attachment styles is brand new to me. Thanks to Abby, of course, as if I could get away with being on this podcast with Abby without learning about attachment. But I value you bringing that in too, but also saying like, maybe it is you, maybe it's something that you could consider looking into, folks out there, right? It's like, look into what your attachments might be like. And there's a lot of research and other things you can read about.
Yeah, like for me, what I started to realize was there was a common thread in a lot of my relationships, and they all cheated on me. That was one of the common threads. And at a certain point I said, like, what's the common denominator here? Oh yeah, it's me. I'm the common denominator. So that's when I really started to like know that there was something that I was doing to attract this into my life. And it's not about placing blame on yourself or beating yourself up, but it's about coming from a place of empowerment and responsibility and saying, okay, there's something I'm doing here that is creating this dynamic in my life, and I want to change it.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've already touched on this a little bit, but you did describe in our call your past relationships as abusive.
Mhm.
And that word really sticks out because there's a lot of different forms of abuse. And we've talked a little bit about this, Abby and I, on the podcast before, but only a little bit. And so hearing you describe your former relationships as abusive stood out to me. And so I thought you told a great story about your drinking and aha moment of realizing something. Could you share a little bit about your relationships with these men and then arriving at that moment?
Yeah. So I definitely did have a pattern of choosing men that didn't speak to me kindly. And so I had a relationship in my teens, early 20s, that he did not speak to me very nicely when we got in arguments, but it was like mild in comparison to these other relationships I was in. So they like basically got worse and worse as I got older. And then the 4 or 5 year relationship I was in my late 20s and early 30s was mostly like verbal abuse that would happen when we would get in fights and whatnot. And I, especially around smoking cigarettes, he hated, even though I smoked cigarettes when he met me, it was a big bone of contention, and I would be called weak and pathetic if I smoked cigarettes. So I would just hide it from him, which of course would cause me to walk around with a lot of anxiety about getting caught. And then when I finally got out of that relationship, because it ultimately ended up in him cheating on me, that's when I said, never again. I'm not going to ever get into a relationship with someone like that again. And then I had a couple of like smaller relationships that I was like actively overvaluing the opposite behaviors in people. But they were still like unhealthy relationships and still like avoidant men, but they were just but they were nice. They were at least kind to me, you know? But then I met the worst abusive relationship that I was in when I was like in my mid 30s. And it started out, it almost is like very textbook. Like it started out with, you know, him talking not nice to me and things like that. And then as it went along, it really turned into a lot of gaslighting that was occurring. Like, you know, he would steal my phone and then lie about it, and then it would magically appear a day and a half later, things like that. And it ultimately led to a physical abuse situation. But while I was in that relationship, I was very determined to make it work. I felt, because he was very good at manipulating my thoughts, I felt like it was my fault that we had these problems. So I was doing a lot of work on myself and investing in self-development courses and everything like that. And that's when I recognized my pattern of rebellion that happened when I turned 18. And then after my previous relationship. And then the aha moment that you were referring to, that I was in a argument with this person, and all of a sudden I realized, despite the fact that I said I would never be in a relationship like that again when I left the one in my 30s, I realized like, oh, holy crap, I am in the same exact relationship I was in 5 years ago. Like, how did this happen? Mind blown. And I had realized before I met him that I hadn't actually ever made a sober decision about a man and getting into a relationship with a man. And I think it's very normal that when we're dating someone, that drinking is a part of the socializing and helps you feel a little more comfortable, break the ice. But I think it was a little bit more than that for me, because my drinking wasn't just occurring on dates. It was like daily drinking that was happening. So when I got into this relationship with this man in my later 30s, I thought making a sober decision about a man meant not drinking on the first few dates, which I did. And I thought I had finally made a sober decision about a man, but I hadn't, because basically I was drinking every other time. And so I think I realized like that was part of like how I got myself in this situation that I said I would never be in again. And the reason why I didn't leave right away was because I felt like there was a lesson to be learned here, that if I didn't learn it, I was doomed to be in this same position later on.
Yeah.
And I didn't want that to happen. And then I was doing all this work on myself, and I realized, I've tried everything, but the only thing I haven't tried is kind of taking a break from drinking. Because of course he would like make comments about my drinking and stuff like that. So I did what everyone who's curious about their drinking does. I Googled it because Google has all the answers. And I Googled like how much is like, I don't think I Googled, am I an alcoholic, which is like usually what the go-to thing is people Google, but like how many drinks is normal in a week or something like that. And I think it said for a woman, it was normal to have 7 to 12 drinks in a week. And I was like, well, I call that Tuesday. So, I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the point is that would have been a stretch for me at that time to do 7 to 12 drinks. So that was kind of what planted the seed that my drinking really needed to be addressed, and that it may be playing a factor here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the first thing, like I just keep hearing again, is like all behaviors communicating unmet needs, right? And so in your childhood, like the rebellion was communicating not liking being controlled, which is a very common thing for children, right? But then the drinking was masking unmet needs that weren't being fulfilled too, right? Whatever those were, maybe feeling insecure, maybe social anxiety. Like when you said the drinking, for me, I was like, yeah, I remember drinking a lot when I was in groups, because part of it was just discomfort. So I guess my question is, and I was along for some of this journey, so I do remember some of it, but my question is, when you had the aha about the alcohol, like what emotions came up considering not drinking?
I was always the person that would take breaks from drinking. I had given up alcohol for Lent once or twice. But it was always in the vein of, I'm going to take a break from drinking to prove to myself that I can, so that I don't have to give it up forever. So it was always a way to prove a point to myself, I guess, that I could take a break from it, because I didn't want to have to quit drinking. And I think too, just to your point, when you were talking, Abby, it occurred to me too, that like, when I was so afraid of like getting in trouble, or I was getting in trouble all the time for things that weren't really like, I shouldn't even be getting in trouble for, part of that rebellion and the drinking was like, well, I might as well do something that's worthy of getting in trouble for.
Right. Right. Yeah. That validating. Well, all right, if I'm going to get in trouble, let me give you a reason.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. When you said that aha, which I love, it's just like, something's got to change, right? I've never made a sober decision about a man and so like, that is such a powerful reflection. So I just want to say I value highlighting that for our listeners, because I think that even if no one's ever drank before, they can probably relate to feelings of that, right? Just like,
well, I think it's just really important. Like what you're saying is, there's this thing out there that you have to be an alcoholic that's losing absolute control of every aspect of your life to need to address your drinking. And that's not true. Right. If you are questioning your drinking and you're saying like, I don't know, is this really something that like is causing me problems in my life? Then the answer is probably yes, if that question is occurring to you. And there is a phrase in the, alcohol-free community, because to be honest, I don't resonate myself with the term alcoholic. I've never used a 12-step approach. I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, I haven't drank in 3+ years.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So, but I did it all, like it was a self-directed course of sobriety. And there's a term called gray area drinking. And I know in terms of your audience, and social anxiety is a big part of a lot of people's drinking stories, and why they start to drink is because they felt social anxiety, and the drinking helped them kind of relax and open up in parties, and it kind of escalates from there. So I just say this because if there's anyone out there listening and you're like, oh, well, I'm not an alcoholic, I don't need to think about, I don't have to quit drinking or whatever. But if you're feeling like maybe drinking is not helping you in your life, because that's how I feel. I just feel like my life is better without alcohol, and that's why I don't drink. I make better choices when I don't drink. I have better relationships when I don't drink. Then I encourage you to just explore it.
Yeah.
You know,
You had said in our call too, like you just tried, right? You tried, and then you saw how you felt. You were like, I'm just going to try drinking a little less. And then you noticed you felt pretty good. And so it's like, all right, I'm going to try that again tomorrow. Right. And so like, it can be sort of an organic thing for some people. When you have the drive and the will. So I'm glad you said that, because it's going to kind of help me dive into the next part of our conversation, which is like when you told me you had decided to make this change, right? You had found all these new tools and strategies that you said actually you wound up having kind of inadvertently, because they were relating to when you were trying to give up smoking to help relieve that anxiety. What were some of those strategies, and how has your life changed since using them? You kind of said like it had helped your anxiety, even though these strategies weren't meant for helping anxiety. It was like part of your to stop smoking strategy.
Yeah. I mean, I had reached such like a rock bottom point in my life at that point, just because extracting yourself from an abusive relationship is like one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life, you know? Yeah. And at first, one of the things I did to get me out of that was I quit drinking, but then I was still smoking while I was drinking. And I noticed that, and I'm a speech pathologist. And so I make up a story that I'm a bad person because I'm a speech pathologist and I smoke cigarettes. Yeah. So I hid it from everybody that I worked with. So that would definitely cause a lot of anxiety, because I wouldn't want anybody to get too close to me. They might smell smoke on me. I liked that I lived far away so that on my personal time, I could smoke freely, blah, 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 blah. But I at the same time knew, like after I quit drinking in March, and in October, I decided to quit smoking because after I had some months of sobriety under my belt and I was doing a lot of personal coaching programs, that was a big tool that I used to get myself to basically save my life and get myself in a better place. This is where that out of integrity came in. Like smoking was no longer in integrity with the person I was becoming. And it was also ruining my voice, which was another big motivator. But so I decided to quit smoking, but I was one of those smokers that I would think about smoking cigarettes before my eyes even opened in the morning. So smoking a cigarette was my morning routine. So I knew I had to replace that with something else. So I bought this journal called the Morning Routine Sidekick Journal or something like that. And I started a whole morning routine, which I was out of exercising at that point. So I started with just doing some gentle, like sun salutations. I did like 3 sun salutations every morning. That's where I started, and slowly worked myself up to like 10 sun salutations every morning, to now I exercise every morning. But I would meditate for 10 minutes. I would read for like 10 minutes from a self-help or spiritual book. I would do 15 minutes of home organization. So that became the first thing I thought about when I woke up in the morning, which really was replacing the habit of smoking cigarettes, which was really helpful. I mean, I also did things like use the patch and sniffed black pepper oil, essential oil, and things like that. But though the morning routine specifically had a trickle down effect in making me just feel better in general, including my anxiety. And then when I had quit smoking and I was no longer out of integrity and leading this hidden part of my life from the people I was spending the majority of my week with, a lot of that anxiety of feeling like I was going to get found out or in trouble, that kind of alleviated too.
Right. I mean, the first thing that I'm hearing that like I really, really love, I was actually just thinking about this the other day, is you can't just make a change without replacing it, right? Like you can't change your belief without replacing it with another belief, right? You can't be like, I'm not going to believe the X I'm not going to believe I'm not good enough anymore. You have to replace it with a belief you're working on.
Yes.
And the same with habits and routines. You can't just be like, I wake up every single morning and the first thing I think about is wanting to smoke a cigarette, and then be like, no, I'm going to wake up and run. Like, I mean, maybe some people are like that, but not me. and so you have to replace it with something else. Or maybe you wake up and you're not like, all right, now it's time for breakfast, because you have that constant thought of, what about the cigarette? What about the cigarette? Right. And so I just think it's so powerful what you're saying. And I'm sure it took a lot of work to
it was conscious and purposeful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But you replaced one habit that maybe was unhealthy and unserving, right, with another habit that not only was healthier and more serving and alleviated your anxiety, but it also allowed you to feel more aligned with who you wanted to be and be yourself around others. Because there's like this duality of like, I'm a good worker and I stayed far away so I could party and drink and smoke, right? And I didn't want my colleagues and coworkers seeing that side of me, right? Or then just with the smoking, like I'm a speech pathologist. Like I don't want to be judged by that, so I won't let them know. And anyway, so like it just is so powerful that by changing your routine in the morning, it also changed your relationship with yourself and how you felt safe being more authentically you around others. So I
love the trickle down, and I love that phrase, right? That it trickled down into you just feeling better overall. And that, of course, that inadvertently, it's the same is true for those anxious feelings that you experience. So I love that. And I just think it's a great reminder for anyone too. It's like, once you decide that even one aspect of your life needs rethinking or changing, it could have positive ramifications for other areas of your life too. Right. And so I'm sure maybe you didn't think you deciding to do what you had to do to quit those habits that weren't serving and that weren't helping you with your voice. That was, as Abby said, keeping you from being exactly who you were becoming. That you were able to be like, okay, like I found it. I found what I need. It's in me. Right. That's the biggest thing too. I think it's in you. And I keep wanting to just tell you. And so I'm just going to tell you that I find you to be so impressive, and all the things you do are impressive. But what's always more impressive to me about a person is all this stuff they've had to overcome. To become who they are. And so like, I just want you to know that you're very strong. Like, and this is why it's important for us to hear each other's stories, because we need that reflection of, you are so strong. It's not anybody that could just decide to give up smoking and then also replace it with a whole bunch of amazing things that then, as you beautifully put it, trickle down into this lovely web of feeling good. Because all of us anxiety warriors we want to feel good. We deserve to feel good. And so you're incredibly strong. I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And I just want to say real quick too, that like where I am today from where I was 3 years ago is an exponential change. But I got there by making tiny little baby steps each day. And I just want to highlight that if you feel like you want to make changes, please just start with something very tiny and small. And you just build upon that tiny and small change each and every day.
That's it. Like, right. Like, and I agree, where you were 3 years ago and where you are now is so different. And I don't even know what it's like to be internal for you. Like, right. Like, I know there's internal and
It's a
external
lot more
shifts.
peaceful.
Yeah. Right. But you couldn't be like, hey, I'm just going to go do one meditation course and it's going to change my life. And that's it. It was like, no, a step by step over 3-year process, but it was worth it.
Yes. Oh gosh.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a great way to finish
10,000%.
that, right? That it's worth it. All those baby steps that you just expressed, Rebecca, it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All the hard work and the tough days that you're going to have, it can and will be worth it if you keep at it. And
honestly, all of the crap that I went through before, that was worth it too, because it was the pain that I needed to make the change.
Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know that I would have made these changes if I hadn't gone through that,
Right.
you know? So it's finding gratitude in that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that. So what would you say is your relationship to your anxiety these days?
I would say that I still have that feeling of, am I going to get in trouble come up, especially because now, because of all these changes I made, I had the courage to leave my 9-to-5 job and start my own business. And so with that, I still get that feeling of, I'm going to do something wrong and they're going to take away my speech license and I'm going to lose my livelihood and my business is going to fall apart. Like, so that comes up still occasionally, but I am onto it when it's happening much faster. I have the tools to use when it happens. I usually have some sort of coach or coaching program that I'm doing that. So I'll reach out to support from a coach if that's happening. I'll do positive self-talk. I'll ask myself, is this my ego or my higher self talking right now? And kind of remind myself, like, this is your ego, you're safe, this is okay, you know. And I really, one of my favorite things, and I think maybe Abby taught me this, was to put my hand on my heart and just speak to myself in a really calm, loving way.
I don't even have to know for sure. I just know she did.
Yes. She did. She also introduced me to the book Attached and taught me that I was anxiously attached.
She's smart, that Abby. She's so smart.
Yes, she is. But I would say that overall, my anxiety is more situational than chronic. So I will have anxiety come up about things, but it's also a signal to me that there's something that I need to look at.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. So what advice would you give young Rebecca, your younger self? And you could pick any stage of your life, or maybe it's just a mantra that you've got for yourself now that you think your younger self, no matter what age younger, would have benefited from.
I would tell her that her opinion matters just as much as anybody else's, and to trust in her own opinion just as much as she trusts in others, and to focus on making herself happy first and foremost.
Yes. So many full body chills every week.
I know.
And it just sends the chills all over. I love it. It's such great, important advice. Love that.
Yeah.
Final question before we get into some lightning round.
I'm so excited.
Lightning round. Okay. What does being an anxiety warrior mean to you?
It means being someone who turns their lessons into their blessings.
Oh, I love that.
And it's just so simple too, right?
Yeah.
So great. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, your story with us. And
thank you for listening.
Yeah. And I just think it's an important one for all the warriors to hear.
Yeah.
So it's time for some fun though. It's time for some fun though. We're going to have some fun.
Oh, boy.
Abby and I are going to go back and forth and ask you some lightning round questions. So it's only going to be a handful of questions. You do not have to answer them quickly. You can take a pause, take a breath, do a quick somatic hold. As we know, we're big proponents of here, hand to heart and belly, whatever feels good to take a pause before you respond.
Okay.
All right. You ready?
I think so.
Okay.
All right. Who's going first?
I don't know. We didn't talk about it.
I'll go first.
Ooh,
I'm gonna give her a lob. I'm going to
I'm
start
proud
out
of
with a
you.
lob.
I'm proud of you for wanting to go first, though, because you usually prefer me to go first. So
Yes.
I'm proud of you.
You said that last episode, I think.
And we appreciate you being a loyal listener.
That's why I'm throwing a lob first.
I told Abby yesterday, I was like, I listened to this podcast and I just wish that I was on the mic there with you girls talking. I absolutely love it. I listen every week.
Oh, love to hear that.
I know she's a loyal listener. So, Becca,
Yes.
best place to listen to our podcast.
I knew you were going to ask me this.
Wait, is it the toilet? I'm just kidding.
No, it is naked in the shower.
Woo! Oh, I'm suddenly feeling very sexy.
I often listen to Anxiety Warriors while I shower.
We're her shower pals.
I love it. Okay, shower pals. This kind of sounds like a weird kid's toy or something horrible. Just throwing that out there.
It's like a special scrubby.
Okay, all right, you're ready. You have an album. What would it be called?
Oh, I have an album. I know what it is. It's Rebecca being Rebecca.
All right.
Bye, Rebecca.
That's a lot of Rebecca's in the title.
I have a friend who I've known for like 20 years, and he used to say, it's RBR. It's just Rebecca being Rebecca.
Dude, I was literally about to say RBR. I cannot believe you just said that. I swear, I was like, let's shorten it a little, RBR. And then you said it. Perfect.
There we go. We got the album.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
So here we go. This might be on the album. This might not be, right? Favorite TV theme song growing up, and then sing it.
Okay. Okay. I have it in my head and I'm blanking on how it starts.
What's the TV show? Maybe we can help.
Yeah.
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
In West Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. I was born and raised on the playground is where I spent most of my days, chilling out back and relaxing, all cool and all, shooting some b-ball outside of school when a couple of guys that were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. I got in one little fight and my mom got scared. She said, "You're moving with your auntie and uncle to Bel-Air."
I love it. I love it.
Okay. What is your favorite item of clothing?
It's my flippers. I have them on right now. You can use this video
Flippers.
on Instagram. These are my flippers.
Okay. I was waiting for like snorkeling flippers. I was like, please tell me she's not wearing like underwater flippers.
This is going to approach being a middle-aged conversation, but so these are my special flip-flops that I had to buy for my plantar fasciitis. And I was so excited when I got them that I couldn't stop talking about them to Mark. And he used to make fun of me. He goes, "I should have bought 2 pair."
Oh yeah, one in all the colors.
All right, last question. I'm down to 2, but I'll give this one. If you were a sound, what would you be? And then make the sound.
I don't know if the sound has a label. Do I need to give it a label?
Oh, you could just make it. Yeah, that's okay.
If I was a sound, bling.
Yes. Love it. I like that sound.
That works.
I was for some reason I was waiting for something else. Like, right? I had a lot of anticipation. I was like, what's it gonna be? I don't know. But that was
I hope I
perfect.
did not disappoint.
No, I like
No, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And it kind of does have a name. It's bling.
it's bling.
But it
Bling.
rings. Bling.
So it's either like a
Yeah.
phone or just something shiny. I don't know.
You
It works
just
either
imagine
way.
that smile with the little ting.
With a little sparkle on the corner. Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. Perfect. All right. Well, before we let you go, we love to ask our guests what their win of the week was. So it could be a win, little win, a big win, any win that you've had this week that we can celebrate.
My win of the week. I was supposed to think about this ahead of time.
Oh, on the spot.
I think my win of the week was finally getting on the phone with my girl, Abby. We had been overdue for a phone conversation and we made it happen this weekend. And
Awesome.
she kept me company on my drive home from New York yesterday. And that was definitely the highlight of my week.
Yeah. Oh, love it.
Yay. It had been a long time
Amazing.
since we caught up. So
Mhm.
That's so great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, if anyone is looking for some resources or support, if they're questioning their drinking or just looking to like take a break or find out more resources, I would love to be a resource for you. You can find me on Instagram at I'm Finding the Balance. I just recently started this page, so I would love some followers.
Yes, everyone go follow.
Yeah, so come check me out, and please feel free to DM me. I am happy to pass along all of the resources and provide support to help anyone who might be similar to a situation that I was in a few years ago. And just know that there is hope and there is a way out.
Love that. So you're at I'm Finding the Balance on Instagram. Yes.
Correct. Yes.
All right, warriors. That's it. That's your job this week. Go look up Rebecca Robbins and start following, reach out. And I love some of the stuff that you post on the page, and I'm excited to keep following your journey.
yeah.
Thank you. And I love following you guys. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Becca. It was such a joy connecting with you.
You too. Bye.
Bye. All right. So this was such a great conversation. I really, really enjoyed re-listening to Rebecca's story. She just shares so much of herself with us and all of the warriors. And I'm always just, each time we have a guest on, I'm always more and more blown away by what folks are willing to talk with us about. It makes my heart really happy that people feel comfortable to share with us and all of the warrior listeners out there so much personal and deep information about their lives and their anxiety.
Right. And normalizing all of this, because so many of us, I'm sure, can relate to so many different experiences, and the bravery in being vulnerable with their experience gives a lot of people permission to feel like, okay, I'm not alone in this.
Or at the very least, self-reflect on their experiences, period, right? Because it's not talked about enough. A lot of people don't even attempt to learn about themselves or ask themselves these questions about how they're feeling or what they're going through. So what were some of your takeaways from this convo? I know you and Rebecca, or Becca, you call her, have had a relationship for a long time. So what were some things that stuck out to you?
So Becca and I have been friends since like 2005. We worked in a school for children on the autism spectrum disorder together for on and off for about 8 years. So we've known each other. I knew when she was a partier, I think she showed her authentic self to me. But one of the takeaways, and I feel like sometimes I repeat this a lot, but I just feel like it's always so important, and even I forget it, so it's for me, is that all behavior is communicating unmet needs. And so I think, like, for parents, when their child is rebelling, their child isn't being a jerk. Their child is communicating something like, hey, maybe this environment is too controlling. And so to really just see people and beyond the behavior, like, what's below that, what are they actually communicating to us? And so that just was like one of my major takeaways, is just how externally we present ourselves one way, and people might see that and make these assumptions, but it's all stemming from something deeper, and oftentimes from childhood.
Yeah, I agree. And I love that Rebecca kind of explores she explored, and what she shares is the duality that she felt through a lot of her life, right? This sort of, like, you just kind of said it a little bit. It's like, outwardly, this is the person I am when I'm, doing work, or when I'm, acing my exams, or doing well in school, and having fun with friends in social settings. But on the inside, right, I'm actually feeling unworthy. I'm feeling lonely. I'm feeling shame. I'm feeling, guilt. And so all of these, I think that part was very relatable. Forgetting about just the need or the craving of drinking or smoking or external substances, but just the dual life that I think so many anxiety warriors maybe feel like they need to do, right? Put on this brave face, be one person over here, and your real self sort of takes the back seat
Right.
for
Always
the
just
fear of being
pretending.
judged. Right.
Yes, for the fear of
Exactly.
being judged. The other thing that kind of aligns with what you're saying, but also was just like a big takeaway for me is, and I'm saying this because I've known Becca a long time, and I feel like some people that listen to this podcast might think about a friend that they know that might be, that they might think of their friend when they hear this story. Maybe they're in like a emotionally abusive or physically abusive relationship. And one of my takeaways is, it didn't matter what I said. I could be a good friend to Becca. I know those exes. They are jerks. But there was nothing I could do. It had to be on her terms and it had to be in her time. And she had to hit her version of rock bottom, because rock bottom is different for everyone, for her to be ready to make those changes. And for me, that was just like, even in just like really listening to this right now, it's like, in some ways, there was nothing I could have done except for show her that I love her and I'm her friend and I'm here for her when she's ready. But it's her journey that she has to take.
Yeah. And I'm sure she felt and feels really lucky that you were that kind of friend, right? Because not everyone has people like that, has support like that. And so if you're listening and maybe you're listening and you aren't an anxiety warrior yourself, but you have a child that is, or a best friend, or a family member, a coworker, whatever, and you're wondering what you can do to support those mini or big anxiety warriors in your life, it's simply being there. As you just said, I'm here when you're ready. I'm listening. Those are the things that people with anxiety really, really need at the root. Yeah. So interesting. And I loved the part too, where how Becca kind of explains that she wasn't necessarily looking for tools or strategies to cope with anxiety, but in her quest to become a better version of herself and considering giving up smoking and drinking, specifically smoking, she found all these amazing coping mechanisms and strategies and changing up her habits and routine. And that inadvertently kind of trickled down, as she put it, into all the aspects of her life that needed improving or could have used some improving. So I love that.
It was a step by step. And I think that is one thing that as children and adults, right? Like I remember I used to nanny for this family, and the little boy would get very frustrated that he couldn't do things the way I could do them. Right. And I was like, I'm not smarter than you. I'm not better than you. I just have more experience and practice. Right. And so for little kids, it's like the step by step in that sense. But for us, for all humans, like if you want to make a change, it takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of practice, and it takes time. Literally one step at a time, one small step for it to be a sustainable change. And so I just really loved how she was able to replace one routine with another routine, and she didn't rush it. She didn't like dive into the deep end of the pool. It was like, let me dip my toe in, then my foot will go in, then I'll take a step down in the pool, and I feel like that's how sustainable change really happens.
Yes, that's the key part of the phrase. I think sustainable change.
Yeah.
Because I think we all have had those moments in our life, not even just about anxiety, but generally where it's like, I just want this to be gone. I just want to make this change. Like, I would just love to be like, I don't want to be anxious anymore. So I'm not going to be like, okay, we all know that that's never the reality.
Yeah.
And so making it sustainable for yourself, right? Or like, I'd like to get in better physical shape, or I want to learn how to cook more at home and not go out to eat as much. Like, you're not just going to be like, all right, well, I'm not going to order out for the rest of my life. No, that's not reality. You're only going to set yourself up for failure at that point. So yeah, it was such a great part of our conversation. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for listening. We hope you really enjoyed this episode and learning about Rebecca. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you think of all of our episodes so far. If there are topic ideas that you have for us, you can reach out to us at anxietywarriorspodcast@gmail.com. You can join our Instagram fam at Anxiety Warriors Podcast. We have lots of fun over there, connecting and sharing wins of the week. Hit us up with anything that's on your mind. We'd love to hear from you. And if you think you'd be an awesome fit as a guest on our podcast, send us a line, drop us a
Yeah.
note, and let's connect on it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, warriors. We love you.
Yes. Thank you so much for going on this journey. We are so, so grateful you're here.
Till next time.